Welcome back to the page, Harry Potter fans. Here we are with Backward with Purpose, Part 1, Always and Always, by Dead Woodpecker, Chapter 12, Just a Memory.
Chapter 12. Just a Memory. Chapter text. Harry blinked. He stared down at a filthy ground covered in bones. He moved his hand, and it squelched in the muck. What the dash? As soon as the thought struck, he felt a wave of dizziness crash over him. A great vast thing that started at his head and pushed with unrelenting force. He barely managed to turn his head in time to avoid spraying his own hands with vomit. He heaved and heaved while his stomach clenched painfully. Harry, Ron's voice. Lockhart. Ron. He's bleeding from his ears, Neville said. What did you do to him? Just stunned him, Ron said indifferently. Might be more powerful because I used 2 wands. Harry retched. The voices sounded as though they came from very far away, as though he were underwater. What's going on? Why were he and Ron and Neville in a place littered with the remains of small animals and smelled like an open sewage pipe? He dropped onto his forearms and threw up again. Harry, Ron said urgently. Get up, come on. Ron, Neville said with a shaky voice. Lockhart needs help. Lockhart, Ron said viciously, is lucky that I didn't kill him. He just obliviated Harry. Where are we? Harry rasped. Ron swore. We're in the Chamber of Secrets, near it, anyway. What? Harry said blankly. The Chamber of Secrets. Ron said desperately. You don't remember. You don't effing remember. He walked over and kicked Lockhart in the shins. Hard. Neville squeaked. I can't. And Harry hated how thin his voice sounded. The tidal wave of nausea closed over him, and he squeezed his eyes shut. Wake up! Wake up! Ron was yelling in his ear and slapping his cheeks. Ron, Harry asked. Somehow he had lain down on the ground, but he'd only blinked, hadn't he? To keep from vomiting again? Stop hitting me. I just blinked. You didn't just blink, Ron said. You've been out for Merlin knows how long. About half an hour, Neville said helpfully. Listen, Ron said. Pull yourself together. My sister needs you. Ginny's in here. He tried to get up, but his legs felt limp. Instead, he gripped Ron's robes and pulled himself up halfway. How'd she get here? Why? What did we do? Damn it, Harry. Ron snarled. He lifted Harry up by his robes, set him on his feet, and shook him like a rag doll. Lockhart obliviated you. Was that why his brain felt like someone had taken a hammer to it? He was supposed to be here. He just forgot? He took several deep breaths. Now that he wasn't so close to the floor, he found it easier to breathe. Lockhart, their defense professor, who was completely useless but was too, well, stupid to be a threat, had obliviated him? Ron, Harry said in a low voice, flicking his eyes toward Neville, who was bent over a still form. Professor Lockhart. Ginny's in there. You remember Ginny? Ron said cautiously. I'll always remember Ginny, Harry said quietly. He knew Ron would get it. Ron moaned with relief. Thank Merlin, he said. I didn't know how much he'd taken from you. I was going barmy. He sagged against the wall of the tunnel as though his legs were barely supporting him. Harry knew the feeling. What's in here? Harry asked. A basilisk, Ron said. That's a giant snake. See that skin over there? That's where it came from. Don't look at it. It'll kill you. And its fangs are poisonous, too. Harry gaped at him. And Ginny's in there with it. Why hadn't they tried to stop this from happening? What kind of horrible mistake had they made? Harry, Ron sounded quite desperate. You got to go. Aren't, Harry licked his lips. Aren't you coming with me? I can't. I don't speak Parseltongue, Ron said. What the hell is Parseltongue? Harry asked. He was trembling now. Whether it was from fear or confusion, he did not know. You can talk to snakes, Neville said. Once Ron's silence made it clear that he could not speak at the moment. That's how he got down here. You hissed something. Ron said it was open. But, he said seriously, you don't have to go alone, Harry. I'll go with you. Ron's fist slammed against the wall. No, you're staying here with me. I've got to keep an eye on Lockhart. BB, but I could go with Harry, Neville said. His face appeared completely bloodless in the flickering light coming from the 2 wands Ron held in his hands. You can handle him if he wakes up. Exactly, Ron said. You're going to keep me from killing him if he wakes up. I have to go alone. Harry asked. There was a hint of a plea in his voice that he hated. But he had no idea where he was and what to do. How were basilisks defeated? He glanced down at his wand. Was there a spell that Lockhart had made him forget? Yeah, Ron said. You speak Parseltongue, he added lamely. Harry gazed at him for long moments. His best mate's blue eyes were wide. He was furious, Harry realized. He had obviously not been joking when he'd told Neville that the other boy would have to stop him from killing Lockhart. Listen, he dragged Harry further up the tunnel, away from Neville, who was staring at them. There's a diary, he whispered. It's like the locket, like the cup. Do you understand? So not only was there a basilisk in there with Ginny, but a Horcrux as well? All right, Harry nodded. It served to shake out the rest of the cobwebs in his head, but he could almost feel the blankness there. I'm going. Any other words of advice? Ron said. Please hurry. Harry set off down the tunnel at once. Neville said something, but Harry didn't respond. Nor did he look back. Ginny was somewhere up ahead, at the mercy of both a basilisk and a Horcrux. Once he could no longer hear Ron's and Neville's voices, he paused to empty his stomach once more. He rested his head against the smooth, wet stone for a moment. Then, every limb shaking, from nerves or anger, he couldn't tell, he continued on. Further and further he went, until he came to a round door engraved with snakes. They almost seemed to move. Harry eyed it. If he could talk to snakes, could he talk to fake snakes, too? They almost seemed alive. Their eyes gleamed at him. Open, he said. It sounded like a hiss. He was not surprised to see that it slid out of the way, revealing the vast room beyond. Wand pointed straight in front of him. He entered. He was in a long hallway. He looked up and could not see the ceiling. Columns stretched up and up into darkness. He walked steadily forward and saw that the room eventually opened up. There was a large statue of a man, and laying face down before it was Ginny, her hair gleaming like fire. He sprinted toward her, and his footsteps echoed, sounding like he was leading an army. But it was only him. He knelt beside her and gently turned her over. Don't be dead, don't be dead, don't be dead, don't be dead, he pleaded over and over again to whomever might be listening. Ginny, he muttered. She was alive. She looked as though she was sleeping. Her chest rose and fell steadily, and her cheeks were a bit flushed. He shook her shoulder. Ginny, he said desperately. Wake up, wake up. Something made him turn around. He thought he'd heard a sound, like someone else was here with them. All he saw was a shadow that somehow seemed malevolent. It seemed like it was breathing. He pointed his wand at her. Enervate, he said loudly. But still, she remained unconscious. He could not imagine what had made him think she was sleeping. Her unnatural stillness was just as frightening as the shadow. Next to her was a small black book. It was the diary that Ron had mentioned, the Horcrux. He picked it up and stared at it with loathing. This was somehow doing it to her. He knew it. He racked his memories, trying to recall if he had ever seen a Horcrux act in this manner. It had changed Ron, had fed his negativity, and had contributed to him leaving Harry and Hermione alone. But he hadn't known it could do this, and even if it had, he'd been obliviated. He paced back and forth, and time marched on with agonizing speed. He examined his memories, and grew ever more furious when he came upon blank spots. He remembered the Horcruxes, all of them but this diary, but he could not remember how some of them had been destroyed. He knew that Fiendfire could do it, but when he thought back to Hufflepuff's cup and how it had been destroyed, he came up blank. Same with the ring. In the first timeline, Dumbledore had done it, but how? He had no idea how much time had passed. He suspected it had been a long time, too long. He looked down at Ginny, and his heart leapt into his throat. Her cheeks were pale, now, and her breathing had become faint. I'm going to screw this up, he thought, and Ginny's going to die. He stroked her hair. He was tempted to unleash Fiendfire and destroy the diary, but he had no way of controlling the vicious flames. Harry Potter, a boy about 16 years old, had stepped out of the shadows. No, Harry blinked. He didn't step out of the shadows. The shadow was him all along, and the shadows still clung to him, as if the boy before him was more smoke than flesh. Who are you? He asked. Tom Riddle, the boy said. Voldemort. Harry gaped at him. What are you doing here?" he asked. "That's an interesting question," Voldemort said. "But I'm afraid that it's your turn to answer some questions. Questions I've had since that stupid little girl began writing in me." "Sorry," Harry said recklessly. "I'm not really in the mood." He pointed his wand straight at the Horcrux that was somehow becoming flesh. He looked down at Ginny again. She seemed even paler and weaker, while the Horcrux grew stronger. "He's stealing her life." Voldemort laughed. It was a high, cold sound that had resonated in Harry's dreams for almost 2 decades. He had laughed just the same way after he had killed Harry's parents. "You can't kill me with your wand, Potter," he said. "And unless you want to hasten your own death, by all means, I can call the basilisk, and you can finally die." "Is that how I can speak Parseltongue?" Harry asked himself. Voldemort can speak Parseltongue, and since I'm a Horcrux, I can too? "Fine," Harry said. "She told me all about you, Voldemort said. How the greatest sorcerer ever lived was defeated by a baby. You, tell me how." "My mother died for me," Harry told him after a moment. He clutched his wand, mentally cataloging the spells that might work against a basilisk. But if he couldn't look at it without risking death, like Ron had said, how could he aim? "And you aren't the greatest wizard in the world, Voldemort. Albus Dumbledore is." Riddle opened his mouth, perhaps to ask how Harry had known who he was, when the most beautiful sound he had ever heard filled the chamber. It was Phoenix Song, and for the first time since he had left Ron and Neville, Harry felt a measure of hope. Fawkes was here. The Phoenix dropped something misshapen and lumpy at Harry's feet. He recognized it at once, the Sorting Hat. Thanks, Fawkes," he said. Fawkes trilled and spread his beautiful wings and soared back up into the darkness. Harry watched Voldemort as he laughed. The truth be told, Harry had no idea why Fawkes had seen fit to bring him the Sorting Hat. He could not see the possible use in this situation. But perhaps Dumbledore had sent Fawkes. Maybe there was a note in there that described how best to kill basilisks, or maybe how to control fiendfire. Harry examined the Sorting Hat while Voldemort continued to laugh. There was nothing there, nothing. "Well," Voldemort said, "if that's the best the old man can do. Time to die, Potter." Harry glanced down at Ginny. He didn't know how he could possibly do it, but he couldn't fail her. Always and always. He tore his eyes away from her as Voldemort called the basilisk. "Kill him," he said in a sibilant voice. Harry ran. He ran to put distance between himself and Ginny, to draw the basilisk away from her. He could hear it sliding behind him, and the faint splashes as more and more of it came out of the pool of water that had surrounded the statue. It seemed endless. If he could just get behind one of the columns, he had about one good chance. He might try Sectum Sempra and cut off its head before its eyes could kill him. Or its fangs. A stream of light flew over Harry as he ran headlong for the columns. "Fawkes!" He heard another trill, this one angry instead of comforting, and the basilisk shrieked. The sound sent ripples of fear down his entire body. He had never known that a snake could make such a sound, and he hoped never to hear it again. He was almost where he could send off one good spell when he tripped and fell hard on the unforgiving surface. His vision blurred when he hit his jaw on a rock, and he watched with horror when his wand flew out of his grasp and rolled away. Whatever Fawkes had done to the basilisk, it had not stopped it for long. He could hear the impossibly long body gliding on the floor. "Kill him, you stupid beast!" Voldemort shouted. "Use your fangs." Harry hoped this meant that Fawkes had taken out its eyes. He stared at where his wand had been thrown, but he could not see it from this angle, and judging by the loud slither, he did not have time to grab it. He had one last chance. He jammed the Sorting Hat down on his head and thought help as loud as he could. Perhaps Dumbledore could hear him. He could save Ginny even if Harry could not. Something heavy came out of the Sorting Hat, landing on top of his head with enough force to blacken the edges of his vision. He ripped the hat off his head, grabbed whatever it was, and rolled over onto his back. He took a quick look at what the Sorting Hat had given him, and with a surge of hope, he saw that it was a sword. The hope changed to fierce determination when he sensed the shadow of the basilisk looming over him. He got up on one knee. That was all he had time for, and grasping the sword in both hands, he lifted it. The huge maw of the basilisk opened before him, and he caught a quick look at the glistening fangs before he thrust the sword up. He felt resistance, and he pushed with all his might, his arms quivering with effort. He chanced to glance up and saw the tip of the sword protruding from the tip of the basilisk's head, right between two bleeding eye sockets. He yanked as hard as he could and rolled away at the same time. He almost made it. A fang punched into his arm, and pain immediately tore through his body. The basilisk convulsed as it died and lodged the fang in deeper. Harry took great gasps of air, and with all of his willpower, ripped it out of his arm. "No!" Voldemort shouted. Harry staggered to his feet, sword still in hand, and kept his eyes on Ginny's hair. He weakened with each step, but he forced himself to continue. When he could no longer walk, he crawled, while Voldemort laughed. And then Harry could no longer move. He closed his eyes, and he could feel tears seep out from behind his eyelids. Something heavy landed on his back, but he had no strength to dislodge it. Everything became fuzzy, and there was a ringing in his ears like the whistle of train. But then, amidst the burning agony of where the fang had punctured his arm, he felt cool moisture, and the pain receded. The whistle, which had grown louder, faded once more, and Harry was able to open his eyes. "Get away from him, bird." The weight lifted off his back, and Harry stood on strengthened legs. He was only 5 feet from Ginny, and as soon as he saw the diary, he knew what to do. It was his only chance. If this sword did not destroy the Horcrux, then Harry had no other options. "Stop!" But he ignored Voldemort, lifted the sword when he was still 3 feet away, and plunged it down, cleaving the diary in two. There was a terrible scream, and Harry turned his head as the riddle that had come out of the diary disappeared. He sat down and gently pulled Ginny into his lap. "Please wake up," he murmured. "Please wake up. Please wake up." Tears trickled down his cheeks as long moments that seemed to stretch forever went by. Finally, she stirred. "Harry," she sighed, blinking her eyes open. "I thought you were dead," he said. She sat up, apparently none the worse for wear, although seconds ago Harry had feared that she would die. She frowned at him. "Are you crying? Aren't I the one supposed to be doing that? I thought you were going to die. I didn't know if I could save you," he told her. Then he pressed kisses on every inch of her face that he could reach. She squeaked when he hid an open eye. "Harry, you knew I would be safe," she said. "You're trembling." She sounded as though she couldn't believe it. "Last time, you weren't nearly so." "I don't remember last time," Harry said. She stared at him, eyes wide with shock. "Lockhart obliviated me. Ron told me. I came in here and saw you. You were dying, and I had no idea what I could possibly do." "Lockhart?" Ginny asked. "You'll have to ask Ron and Neville the details," Harry said. "There are huge blank spots in my memory. Why did we let this happen, Ginny?" Ginny looked at the sword he'd thrown aside when he'd destroyed the diary. "We needed that sword, Harry, badly enough to let this happen again. It destroys Horcruxes now. We need it. When we first started planning to come back, Dumbledore told us that to attempt to destroy them, we couldn't rely on Fiendfire, especially when we have to kill the snake and destroy the cup." He sighed. He felt exhausted all of a sudden. He pressed a kiss to her hair. "From now on, we fight side by side," he said firmly. She smiled at him. "When we can. But I'll tell you this. I'm not going to do this again. Ever." "No, you aren't." She sighed and put her head on his shoulder. They sat like that until Harry felt his legs falling asleep. "We have to go," Harry murmured. "Ron will be going spare. I have no idea how long I've been here. Hours, probably." "What were you doing?" she asked. "Apparently waiting for a phoenix to bring me an old hat," he said dryly. She stood and grasped his hand, pulling him to his feet. He bent over and picked up what remained of the Horcrux and the sword. He looked at it and wrinkled his nose. "Couldn't we have just bought a sword?" Ginny laughed. "It's Gryffindor's sword, Harry. You can't just buy it. You have to prove that you're courageous and that you've got nerve." "I don't think I've ever felt less brave in my life," Harry said. "That's probably why you got it." They made their way quickly through the chamber. Ginny held the diary, and Harry held the sword. Fawkes glided silently above them, making it unnecessary to light one of their wands. It seemed to take much longer than it had. They heard Ron shouting before they even came close to seeing him. Either Ron was yelling very loud, or the acoustics in the tunnel were amazing. Harry suspected it might be both. "We're here," Harry called. Then, instead of shouting, he heard footsteps running toward him and saw faint, bobbing lights. Ron ran fast, and he gripped first Ginny and then Harry in a bone-crushing hug. "I thought you were dead." "Almost," Harry said. "You've been gone for almost 3 hours. Where's Lockhart?" Ginny asked. "Back there with Neville," Ron said. Suddenly, Harry felt a rage so intense that it frightened him. Without looking at the other two, he strode ahead, wand raised. Lockhart had taken away his memories, had violated Harry, and had nearly ruined everything. He raised the sword as soon as he saw him. Neville gasped, "Harry." Harry wanted to kill Lockhart very badly. He stared at the man for almost a minute. He was lying very still and motionless. "Is he dead?" "And no," Neville said. "He even woke up, but he keeps going back to sleep. I've even been trying to, help him." Harry did not like knowing that he probably would have killed Lockhart had Neville not been there. He lowered his wand and the sword. Neville could not possibly understand. He did not know of the time travel, did not know that Lockhart could have destroyed everything. It was only luck that Harry had retained his memories. He remembered very clearly that Lockhart had intended, the first time, to destroy Ron's and Harry's minds. But Neville could not possibly know, and Harry felt ashamed when Neville looked at him with something like fear. "Sorry, Neville," Harry said. "He really scrambled my brains." Neville looked so relieved that Harry felt even guiltier. "That's okay, Harry," he said. Fox flew around a corner in the tunnel, and Neville gaped at him. "Is that a phoenix?" "Yeah." Harry chuckled a little. "He saved my life." Ginny and Ron came around the corner then. Neville sighed with relief. "We thought you were dead," he said. "Both of you. You were gone for so long." "We're fine." Ginny's voice shook. Harry looked closer and saw that there were tears in her eyes. "I don't know how we're going to get B back, though." She glared at Lockhart's prone shape, and Harry realized that her tears were more from anger than anything else. "Phoenixes are supposed to be really strong," Neville said tentatively. "Maybe this one can help us. I don't know how it'll manage Lockhart, though." "Can we leave him down here?" Ron asked. He laughed. Apparently Ron had worked through his anger. The fact that Harry and Ginny were safe probably helped. It took the combined effort of Ron, Harry, and Neville to carry Lockhart to the pipe that led back to Hogwarts. Ron dropped his feet with a curse. They lined up behind Harry and the Phoenix. Ginny gripped his hand. Ron gripped his sister's shoulder and, with extreme reluctance, picked up one of Lockhart's feet again. Neville kept his hand under Lockhart's armpit. Without further ado, Harry grasped one of Foxtail feathers. He felt unbelievably light, and then they were soaring up and up through the pipe, and it took what seemed like no time at all to find themselves in a familiar-looking bathroom. Didn't Dumbledore say that he'd be in his office? Harry asked for Neville's benefit. "Yeah," Ron said. "I think we're supposed to follow that phoenix." Harry reluctantly dropped Ginny's hand, and they followed Fawkes into the dimly lit corridor. "Harry," Ron said, "help us with this git." Harry sighed and doubled back to grab the arm that Neville did not hold. It seemed to take forever, and by the time they reached the gargoyle, Harry's back was one massive ache. He thought several times about just dropping Lockhart and letting him be. With every step that Harry took, the resentment of having his mind violated grew. While he knew that Obliviate was useful, when used as a weapon for greed, it was nearly as bad as the Imperius Curse. As soon as they stepped on to the moving staircase that led to Dumbledore's office, Harry dropped Lockhart with a huge sigh of relief. The relief faded quickly when he heard raised voices. They were muffled by the heavy oak door, but he could hear Mrs. Weasley's voice and Mr. Weasley's in a lower, steadier voice that was almost certainly Dumbledore's. "Don't care about a phoenix. That's Mum," Ron whispered, his eyes wide. "He took our daughter and our son, and I am not standing here a moment longer." Harry had the horrible suspicion that Mrs. Weasley was not talking about Tom Riddle. He took a deep breath. He was about to push it open when footsteps rushed toward him from the other side, and the door crashed open. He stared at Mrs. Weasley, who looked thoroughly disheveled, and her eyes narrowed in anger and fear the moment her attention was caught by the scar on his forehead. The instant before she sent a hex at him, Harry knew the signs. She caught sight of her children, who stood and stared silently at her, looks of shock written clearly across their faces. "Ginny, Ron," she whispered faintly. "What?" Ginny burst into tears, and Harry had no idea if she was acting or not. He didn't look at her, but skirted around Mrs. Weasley and entered the room. "Lockhart's hurt," he said. Mr. Weasley and Professor McGonagall simply stared at him, mouths open in shock. He could imagine the picture he made. He was covered in muck and blood, his robes were torn, and he carried a sword in one hand and a wand in the other. With an effort, Harry turned away from Mr. Weasley, whose look of extreme anger had melted into bewilderment when Ron, Ginny, and Neville came in behind him. Dumbledore was beaming at him, and he looked at Harry with pride, relief, and concern. Ginny still cried, and had her face hidden in her robes. "I think," McGonagall said weakly, clutching her chest. "I think we need an explanation." Harry glanced at Ron. There was no way that he could explain anything, not with the gaping holes in his memory. So Ron spun the lie that they had practiced over and over again. He told them how Harry had heard voices in the walls, but they'd written it off as Harry being injured. Then, he told them that they'd begun to suspect something was wrong at the school when the chamber was opened, and the first message was left on the walls. And after the two students had been petrified, and Harry had admitted to hearing that voice again, Ron said that he thought of a basilisk. It was a snake, and since Harry was the only Parseltongue in the school, he was the only one who could hear it. They didn't tell their other friends because they weren't sure, but Harry had heard the voice again just that afternoon. They'd lied and said that they had detention with Snape, but really they had been following the voice that came from the walls. Harry kept his eyes on Dumbledore, ready to interrupt Ron if he said anything that would be known for a lie. But Dumbledore only nodded his head every once in a while. He didn't believe a word of it. He knew the truth, but the lies sounded enough like truth to make it believable. Then Ron said firmly, "We heard Professor McGonagall say that Ginny'd entered some girl's bathroom, and we reckoned that the Chamber of Secrets was in there. So we went and ran into Neville and Lockhart on the way, and they came with us. Then Harry made the Sinks move when he talked to them in Parseltongue, and there was a tunnel. That is all very well and good, Mr. Weasley," said McGonagall, who had apparently recovered from the shock. "But it was very irresponsible of you not to alert teacher." Ron looked pointedly at Lockhart. "He's the defense against the dark arts teacher," he said reasonably. Neville looked at him quickly, but then looked away. McGonagall narrowed her eyes at him. She refrained from saying what they all knew she wished to say, but asked instead, "And why are you being so quiet, Mr. Potter?" "Because Lockhart obliviated me," Harry said quietly. "Yeah," Ron said. "We were already in the tunnel when Lockhart knocked Neville over and stole his wand. Before I could do anything, he stole all of Harry's memories. Then Harry was really sick." Dumbledore looked at Harry sharply with a question in his eyes. Harry shook his head an infinitesimal amount. He sat back. "I take it you remember everything from that point on?" "Yes," Harry said, and then it was his turn to talk. He told them everything, and he only omitted the knowledge of the Horcruxes that he had from the future and his reaction to Ginny waking up. Everyone sat in rapt silence, even Ron and Neville. "So I did the only thing I hadn't tried yet. She was holding in her hands, and I used the sword to cut it in half. The shadow of Voldemort disappeared, and Ginny woke up." "I'm SS sorry," Ginny cried. I didn't know." "It is quite all right, Miss Weasley," Dumbledore said quietly. "Strong. Adult wizards have been enchanted by Voldemort as well. There was no lasting damage done. I expect that Madame Pomfrey will have the Mandra potion ready in no time. There will be no punishment. I expect that a stay in a hospital wing for tonight will suffice, and perhaps some hot chocolate." Ginny nodded. "Thank you." The Weasleys left, all except Ron, who was glaring at Lockhart again. Harry could tell that he wanted to give the prone professor a good kick. Harry was actually starting to feel a little worried about the professor. Had Ron killed him with the force of 2 wands casting the stunning spell? "Professor McGonagall," Dumbledore said, I think Gilderoy needs attention from the hospital wing. If you could, she nodded sharply and used her wand to levitate Lockhart gently. I'll leave you to deal with Potter, Weasley, and Longbottom. Mr. Longbottom, Dumbledore said, it is my belief that you went along for the ride. You may go tell the others in Gryffindor Tower what has happened here this night. Neville nodded. Thank you, Professor, he said quietly. Mr. Longbottom, Dumbledore added, for your bravery and willingness to help a fellow student and friend. 100 points to Gryffindor. They waited a few moments after Neville left, just to be sure that he was out of earshot. Then Ron's anger exploded with the force of a small bomb. That effing idiot obliviated Harry, he shouted. His face matched his hair. I thought that Harry had been wiped senseless, like Lockhart did to himself last time. He was sick, and then he passed out for half an hour. He had no idea where he was, what he was doing. And you remember everything? Dumbledore said. Everything besides the chamber, that is? Yes, Harry said. But there are holes in my memory in other places. Ginny said that we used the sword to destroy Horcruxes, and that was the reason why we did this. Thank Merlin, Ron said. I was going barmy. I think I might have to apologize to Neville. I told Ginny, Harry said solidly. And this counts for you too, Ron. I told her that there may be things that I've got to do on my own, but the rest of the time I want you there. No more using each other as bait. I agree, Dumbledore said quietly. When I fight, you fight, Ron said. And when you fight, I fight. Mostly anyway. Always and always, Harry said. The days slid by quickly after that, and Harry felt such an overwhelming feeling of peace, only punctured by the anger he felt toward Lockhart, and he was able to express that fully when he was alone with Ginny and Ron, who were even angrier than he was, that many people remarked upon his good mood. He threw himself with renewed fervor into the small group he had started with Neville, Hermione, Luna, Ron, and Ginny. Things were progressing there even better than ever. Hermione, who had run up to him at the feast after Harry had slain the basilisk and thrown her arms around him and Ron, had been extremely upset about what she called unfounded accusations. Apparently she had, at some point, spoken to the Weasleys, Dumbledore, and McGonagall while Harry was in the chamber. The fact that adults she trusted were willing to believe the worst in Harry had prompted her to newer heights in her spellcasting ability. Neville was also very enthusiastic about learning in a room of requirement. And if he sometimes stared at Harry and Ron with a perplexed look on his face, Harry brushed it off as an unfortunate side effect of almost murdering Lockhart in front of him. Luna, however, approached the baby Dumbledore's army with the same not-quite-attentiveness that she did everything else. And, even better than all of that, Lucius Malfoy had attended another of the Slytherin Quidditch games. And he brought Dobby. He'd brushed by Malfoy, past the sock Harry had taken off when he noticed the white blonde hair, and Malfoy, predictably, had thrown it, and Dobby had caught it. He'd laughed at Malfoy's threats and told him they were even. Then he had walked away, a stunned and happy Dobby following him. The only worry that steadily grew on Harry's mind as April died was the fact that Sirius Black had not attempted to contact Harry. He knew he was out. Dumbledore had confirmed it. Kingsley Shacklebolt, an old friend of his and hopefully a future friend of Harry's, had been the one to take his release papers to Azkaban. He'd seen him, given him all the information he'd need to re-enter society as a free man, went with him to Gringotts to reopen his account, found him lodgings at the Leaky Cauldron, and had promised to return the next day. By the time he'd returned, Sirius had already disappeared. "Have you found Sirius yet?" Harry asked half-heartedly in the middle of May. He'd asked Dumbledore every time they met in the room of requirement. "Not yet." Dumbledore shook his head. "This isn't like Sirius," Ginny murmured. "I would have thought he'd be pounding on the doors of Hogwarts, demanding to see Harry the day after he was released." "Maybe Sirius is a little balmier this time around," Ron muttered. "May I try to find him?" Snape said snidely. "And oh," for people shouted. "I will continue doing everything I can," Dumbledore said. "I've set a ward around Grimmauld Place. It'll alert me if he goes anywhere near it. I've got contacts watching for him, mainly Mundungus Fletcher. Did Remus say anything when you interviewed him for the job?" Harry asked desperately. Unfortunately, this was the third time he had asked, and he knew that the answer was no. No, Harry, Dumbledore said patiently. Remus was quite unwilling to talk about Sirius at all. In fact, he had enough tact, not to mention the fact that he had already told Harry this several times. Damn it, Harry said loudly. He wanted to kick something. He looked around and saw a simple vase sitting on a table he had not noticed. Without hesitating, he seized it and threw it against the wall. It shattered gratifyingly. Harry wondered if the Room of Requirement had amplified the sound a little. Harry, I assure you that he will not be able to hide for long, Dumbledore said. He hid from the Ministry for almost 2 years, Ginny pointed out, before he went to Grimmauld Place. He wasn't hiding from me. Just find him, Harry pleaded. We need him.